am going to try to keep an eye on the chat during the presentation. So please chat if you have any questions or just unmute yourself and ask. I put in the chat box the slides for tonight's presentation, as well as a couple of supplemental documents that I'm going to show. You do have access elsewhere to all of these documents, so it is not critical that you pull them off of the chat, but the slides you will probably want. I can also email them out later. All right, so welcome everybody. It's great to see all of your names. I can't really see all of your faces, but thank you all for coming. This is a really exciting time for all of you who are pursuing residency, but also can be stressful. So what we are trying to do this year is give you even more assistance, guidance. This particular presentation is really geared towards just helping you navigate the residency application process, know what's going to happen and when it's going to happen. So review a timeline for residency application, discuss all the components of the residency application process, but you will be going through many of these other components separately at other workshops that are part of this series. We'll review some tips for ASHP Midyear, as well as discuss the residency matching process. And I want to also take some time to point out the available resources that are out there for those of you who are applying to residency, or for the P3s who are on, who are thinking about applying to residency next year, and what you can be doing even now at this point. And just again, quickly, I keep losing the chat box because I'm sharing my screen. So if you have a question, it might be best if you just unmute and ask me. I will try to check in periodically, but it's going to be a little difficult. All right, so some resources that we have available for students who are seeking residency. ASHP, I believe I've shared my whole screen, so now you should see this going to the internet and the ASHP guide. If anybody wants to tell me if they can or can't see the internet here, I would appreciate it.
We see it.
Awesome, thank you so much. So ASHP's Student Residency Guide, and you can follow the link in the slides that I've posted or Google search it. They have a lot of fantastic information, all the way down to P1s, P2s, P3s, why should I do a residency, a guide for P1 to P3 students, and then also for P4s, a guideline, a timeline for the residency application process, the ASHP online directory, where I hope everybody has spent some time already. And if you haven't, you'll want to after tonight. And then links to forecasts and the National Matching Service. And we'll come back to some of these links later. There's also textbooks available. This first one I've probably showed you every time I've met with you since P1 year. It's available on Access Pharmacy. I noticed they changed the format of Access Pharmacy, and there's a ribbon of textbook pictures up at the top. It's not in there. You do just have to search for it. So if you just type in roadmap, you'll be able to get this book pulled up. And then there's other books. Get the Residency. This is one that ASHP has offered through the years. ACCP, I believe, puts one out too. I don't really have any personal student experience with anything but the roadmap book. And although they are getting a little bit older, what's in the roadmap book is still extremely relevant. And I will go through some of that today and show you some of the tables in that book. All right, so what should you be doing right now? It is October 20th. We'll look at the residency application timeline here. So basically, we're here in October. You can actually be registering for midyear already. You can be planning on what programs you want to visit at the showcase. You can also register for Personnel Placement Service, PPS, through midyear. We'll talk a little bit about that later. We won't be planning travel and housing for midyear this year. Also working our way backwards, what should you have been doing up to this point? CV, really, really important to keep up to date. At this point, if you don't have what you consider to be an up-to-date polished CV, you're gonna wanna get that in place fairly soon. And you should be having people look at the CV. We'll talk about that as well. You can start working on your letter of intent or cover letter. You might see those two titles used interchangeably when it comes to residency, but really it's a letter of intent. And we'll talk a little bit about that as well. And you can be asking for letters of recommendation, even if you had a rotation in July and it went really well. You can ask that preceptor. You could have asked them back then. If you didn't, you could ask them now to provide a recommendation for you. It is most definitely not too early, even for P3s, to start searching the ASHP directory or just good old Google searching for residency programs that you might find of interest to you. We will talk a little bit about how to narrow down those choices. This can be a challenge for students, especially if you're not geographically committed to one place or another. There's a lot of programs out there. All right, so if you haven't already, register for ASHP Midyear. Now, normally for P3s, I say maybe don't bother with Midyear because you want to save your money for P4 when it's more important. This year, though, as you probably know, like everything else, ASHP is going to be all virtual. And what they've done is they've made registration free for student and resident members of ASHP. So if you're an ASHP member, you can register for the meeting and you can register for PPS for free. So for this year, I say P3s, even possibly P2s, P1s who are curious, why not? It's certainly not going to cost you anything other than, you know, the time it takes to sit through the programming. But they have some fantastic student programming that's geared not even just for P4s. P3s might find it useful as well, and we'll look at some of that in a bit. The one thing I will mention is it's free for members, but if you're not a member, I would highly suggest becoming a member. Becoming a member for a student is something like $54, $55, whereas a non-member student registration is like $219. So now's a really good time to become a member if you're not, because you could take advantage of registering for free. Again, CVs can be done right now. That way, that's one thing out of your way, because unless you do something extraordinary between now and December, you can pretty much have your CV completely updated and ready to go. Letter of intent, you can sort of start, but you need to know what programs, at least a couple of programs that you're interested in to get that ball rolling. You can again start to request. I have letters of recommendation. They're actually not letters anymore. They're recommendations on a template. And it's time to start finalizing your quote unquote short list of residency programs. All right. Then when we get into December, we have midyear. You're going to be finalizing all your forecast documents. Actually, going back a step, November, you can register for forecast. I believe it opens November 3rd. November 3rd, the match and forecast registration opens. December, you'll really want to finalize all those application materials. We'll talk about your whole application packet. Most deadlines are going to be sometime between, I used to say December 31st and the end of January, but they seem to be creeping earlier and earlier. I've seen some as early as December 27th and 28th. So you may have deadlines right after the holidays. Then interviews are typically done in January and February, and the first Friday in March, you have to have your finalized rank order list. And then I believe it's March 19th this year, that's when the match results are released. This is everything in a nutshell, but we're going to go through in more depth. So what goes in your application package and forecast? These are the essentials: your letter of intent, your CV, 3 recommendations usually. Some programs will ask for 4, but we'll talk about that in a moment. A transcript, I'll go back to transcript as well. And some programs might ask for some supplemental materials. There are programs out there who will ask for things like an essay, a presentation, or other samples of your work, like upload a de-identified patient consult that you've written, something like that. So you want to focus on the package. You want to make sure that you're sending an overall cohesive message with your application package. So what I really mean by this is that, so it says every document is a piece of the puzzle. You want to make sure, for example, that your letter of intent and CV work together, okay? You don't want to be mentioning things in your letter of intent that aren't in your CV. On the flip side, you don't want to be regurgitating everything in your CV on your letter of intent. So what the program directors and preceptors are looking for in your application package as a whole, which includes your transcripts, your CV, your letter, your recommendations, can you do the job and will you fit on the team? And we all know how competitive residency application is these days. So most programs, and when you get surveyed by ASHP, they will be looking for it. And if you don't have it, they will tell you as a program to create it. Most programs should have a rubric by which they screen applications. So I can't even tell you the exact total on the rubric that I use for my program. I'm a PGY2 program, so it's a little bit different, but we're looking for PGY1s, you're going to be seeing on, or what would be on a rubric would include everything from grades on the transcript to types of rotation to letters of recommendation to leadership to scholarship to teaching experience. All of that in some way, shape, or form will probably be a part of how programs evaluate your application as a whole. So let's start with the letter of intent. You only have one chance to make a first impression, and in this case, that is the letter of intent. It's the first thing that is going to be read when we download, we being program directors, when we download the application packet from Forecast. There's some demographic information that comes out, but then your letter of intent comes out on top of your CV. So we do get to see all of that. The letter of intent is going to answer some questions for a prospective program director. Very simply, what was that? What did I just do? I have no idea. I'm not even touching my mouse. But anyway. Who are you and what are your goals? How do your current skills and experiences prepare you to meet those goals? And we'll talk about how a letter of intent will break down on the next slide. And how can you contribute and learn from this residency program? So maybe why residency in general and why this residency in particular. So what goes into a letter of intent? Usually we break it down into 3 sections: the introduction, the body, and the conclusion. So the intro is going to be very, very to the point. Who are you and what are you applying for? My name is Erin Slazak. I am a P4 student at the University of Buffalo, and I am excited to be applying to your PGY1 program at the University of Rochester Medical Center. How did you hear about the program? So if it's appropriate, and only if you actually communicated with someone, I shouldn't say spoke to someone, because this year some of your communications might be chat or email. But if you communicated with someone from the program, this is the place to put that name so they know that you've connected with someone. The body, 1 or 2 paragraphs, small paragraphs though, so not super long. First paragraph, how are you a good fit for this program? Second paragraph, how is this program a good fit for you? So how are you a good fit for this program? How have your experiences prepared you to be a successful resident in this program? How will your experiences make you an asset? This is where you can talk about, you can do the humble brag, talk about your leadership, your scholarship, how you're different from your peers. This is not the place where you want to talk about your qualifications that are the same qualifications that every student has. Like, you know, you're a trained immunizer. You took the APHA MTM program. That's nice, but A, it's on your CV, and B, everybody else in your class did too. So this is where you want to distinguish yourself as a uniquely qualified candidate. And then how is this program a good fit for you? How will this particular program help you to facilitate achievement of your professional goals? So you need to here tie into your long-term goals and also goals for your residency year. And you know what? Not everybody knows that they want to finish residency, do a PGY2 in infectious diseases, and become an infectious diseases clinical pharmacist in an acute care hospital. And that's okay. But think about something you might want to do or try to keep your goals to then what happens after your PGY1. And then conclusion is just a very short paragraph, a couple of sentences, summarize and thank them for their time. Remember that it's an honor that they're reading your letter. They're giving you their time by reading your letter. You don't want to take that for granted. So thank them for their time. And the one thing that you'll notice I probably said over and over was this particular program. So I very frequently get questions. Do I really need to personalize this for every program? Yes, for the most part, yes. There may be chunks of a letter that you can use for each program, especially if the programs you're applying to all have a similar thread. But for the most part, you're going to want to make sure you're very specific to what the program offers. Maybe you're interested in a program because of a PGY2 program that they offer as well. Maybe you're interested because of certain rotations that they offer. Maybe you're interested because it's at a university-sponsored setting and you're interested in academia. So you want to be as specific as possible. And if any of you, this doesn't usually apply to a lot of students, but it happens sometimes that students will apply to both PGY1 pharmacy residencies and PGY1 community or PGY1 managed care. If you're applying to several different types, like drastically different types of residency programs, really, really be careful because you don't want your hospital pharmacy letter to look like your managed care pharmacy letter. They should be different. So a couple of do's and don'ts. We definitely want this to be a formal business letter. And a lot of students will approach me now saying they don't feel really comfortable writing, and that's okay. But this is time to pull up those templates, do it properly, and have somebody read it. Have many people read it over. Be concise. Try to keep it to one page. It's okay if this spills onto a second page, but you really don't want 2 full pages. I participated in a student professional development program a few years back, and the speaker who talked about letters of intent quoted a statistic from a survey that program directors spend somewhere between 2 and 2.5 minutes reading a letter of intent, which if you think about it is very short. So you don't want them to stop before you get to the end. You want them to read all the way through. Sign the letter and scan it back. I know we have the option of doing like fancy cursive fonts, but if you can actually have your signature, you know, whether you place it in digitally or whether you sign and scan back in, it doesn't matter, but sign the letter, give it that personal touch. I alluded to this before, but proofread. Program directors all over will fully admit that they take a highlighter or a red pen to spelling errors or factual errors about their program or grammatical errors. So please be careful. Have a faculty advisor or mentor or preceptor review it. So we went through, if you answered a survey that I sent out back in July that you were interested or possibly interested in residency for the P4s, you were paired with either your advisor or if your advisor was faculty who weren't comfortable with residency advisement, you were paired with a different advisor, probably Dr. Woodruff or Dr. Schilbert or myself. So you can utilize them to review your letters of intent. You can definitely have friends, family proofread, but you really want your advisor or mentor or preceptor that you trust to review it for you. And probably you don't want to have too many people reviewing it for content. I would say 1 or 2 is adequate because everybody's going to have their own little personal spin on what the letter of intent should look like. So you don't want to be getting 5 different messages from 5 different people. We already talked about personalizing for each program. I hope that's something you most definitely take away with you tonight. Some don'ts. Don't regurgitate your CV. They are going to read that in addition to your letter of intent. Try to avoid too many buzzwords. This isn't the time for your life story. Also, and this isn't on the list, but this also is not an exercise in creative writing. I've seen some very, very interesting letters of intent that talk about the moment I had a rotation in the emergency department, the smell of the sterile environment and the beeping of the machines and the buzz of the people who worked there really ignited my passion for emergency medicine. That's lovely if you're writing for a descriptive writing type of project, but that's not what you want your letter of intent to look like. It really needs to be more to the point. Try not to use generic words to describe the program. Something that comes up quite frequently is like, it's my honor to be applying for your prestigious program. Well, what program directors will say sometimes is, my program has been around for 2 years. It's not really prestigious. Why are you referring it to it as prestigious? So don't be generic, be sincere. And don't include, like I mentioned, qualifications that every candidate is going to share. You all have your PharmD degree. Probably you all are immunizers. You've all taken a certain level of training. So make sure that the qualifications you list are unique for you. I will tell you, I was just at a residency showcase for another school a few weeks ago, and one of the programs mentioned something that I found surprising. I'm not necessarily endorsing it. I'm not a big fan of it, but they do it, and apparently they got it from another program who does it. But they said that they actually put something on their website that says, include this sentence in your letter of intent. And they give you a sentence to include in your letter of intent. Almost like not out of the context, but basically then they look to see if you included it in your letter of intent. And if you don't, you don't get an interview, which I find a little intense and harsh. But what they're trying to find out is, did you read their program descriptive materials? Did you do your homework on their program? So just keep that in mind, that there are some interesting qualifications out there. We have a letter of intent writing workshop for you that Dr. Woodruff is going to lead. By virtue of signing up for this program, you're also signed up for that program. I would highly suggest that you take advantage of it. We purposely scheduled it after midyear so that you should have a clear picture of what programs you're applying to. And you need to bring a draft because you're going to be working with a partner and with a faculty member to review and edit and revise your draft. I'm going to stop here for just a second. Does anybody have any questions on letters of intent? I'm more than happy to answer it here. I will admit this is probably what gives the students the most, I don't want to say difficulty, but stress in getting it correct. Let's see if anybody's chatting. Any questions? No questions. Okay. Going once, going twice. So moving on to CV preparation. There are templates available. If you've ever been to Dr. Meany's CV prep workshop through SSHP at our school, he has a template that a lot of us faculty share with students. If you're one of my advisees, I've probably sent it to you like 5 times. ASHP, right back where we were on the same website, they have a CV development section. There's tips on preparing it, traditional CV components. These are CV transitions, like once you are a resident, how will your CV transition? That's not something that you really need to worry about today. There are also a couple of professional organizations that offer CV review. The ASHP one, it's usually a very early deadline. Yeah, only from July to September 3rd. So that's passed. I know ACCP also offers a CV program, but I don't know what the deadline is. Roadmap to postgraduate training also, this is the one link I didn't replace. Roadmap to postgraduate training also has a couple of examples. I can't really show them because they're several pages long, but if you go into the chapter, it gives you some examples and actually annotates them with comment bubbles saying, this is what's good about this section. This is what's not good about this section. So it's nice that it gives you those examples to look at. Again, CV review is a must. This is something that your faculty advisor or mentor or even a preceptor can be looking at for you. Again, by virtue of being here tonight, you're also registered for Dr. Meany's workshop. I believe he's asking for everybody to submit a CV so that it can be reviewed. I don't know if we can accommodate everyone, but faculty will be pushing or pitching in on that as well. So I'm sure you'll see more coming from him in a couple of weeks. Let's see. There's also a session usually at midyear. We'll look at that when we look at the student programming section for midyear. So what goes on a CV? We've got personal information, obviously, like your name, your contact information, your education and licensure and certification. Your professional experience includes both your pharmacy work experience and your IPPEs and APPEs. The IPPEs, if you're in a P4, you can probably remove your P1 and P2 IPPEs unless they're extremely relevant to a position that you're seeking. Honors and awards, publications, organization membership, and leadership experience. We break out leadership experience in a separate section. Teaching experience, if you were a TA, if you were a ROCI tutor, if you offered review sessions through another organization, if you did a teaching and learning APPE and got to teach through that experience, all of that goes under teaching experience. And if you don't have Dr. Meany's template, well, I'm sure he'll be supplying it to you if he hasn't already for the workshop coming up, but I'm happy to send it as well. Any service that you've done, generally as it relates to pharmacy, but I've also seen some general community service on there as well, which is fine. Any presentations that you've done, meeting attendance. And then things to avoid, actual dates of birth, any like social security number doesn't have to go on there. Classes taken in pharmacy school can generally not go on your CV unless it's what I would put under the header additional coursework, like if you took my diabetes elective or you took the oncology elective. Those are types of unique coursework that you would want to put on your CV. You don't need redundant or excessive descriptions. So the one thing a lot of students struggle with is how much to put in as a description, like for your APPs or your pharmacy intern positions. Typically, if we do bullet points under, limit it to 3, and they shouldn't be more than like a line or 2 each. But truly, and certainly it's up to you because ultimately the CV is your representation of yourself. But truly, you don't necessarily need the descriptions. They're not a must. If you said you had an APPE at Rite Aid Pharmacy, a community rotation, I can guess what you did. If you had an internal medicine or a family med rotation or ID rotation or oncology, I can probably guess what you did. And if I can't figure it out, I can ask you. And also anything that you did that was notable on that rotation, like if you gave a topic discussion presentation, or you presented at grand rounds, or you wrote a newsletter article, or whatever it is that you did on that rotation, you can put in these other sections. So presentations, you can list, you know, during my oncology rotation, I gave a presentation on the treatment of XIV. Same thing with research. If you work on a project during the rotation, you can put that under research experience. And there's Dr. Mimi's workshop. And I'm also going to pause here to see if anybody has any questions before we move on to references. Unmute or go ahead and chat me and I will take a look. No questions. Okay. All right, moving on to reference writers. We'll start with who. So who should be writing your references? Generally, clinical preceptors are going to be able to offer a good appraisal of your clinical skills, your knowledge, your critical thinking, etc. If you can, now this won't apply to everybody, but if you can, try to ask preceptors who are used to working with residents and know what should be included in a good residency reference. Not everybody really understands, even though it's a template, you'd be surprised. Some references are, I guess, underwhelming would be a way to put it. They just don't say a lot about the candidate. And you want to feel like you know the candidate after reading the recommendations. An employer or supervisor. So many programs will specifically ask you for a letter from your employer or supervisor. Some will not. Even in programs that don't ask for it directly, some program directors I've heard say that they consider it a red flag if you have a job and don't get a letter from your employer. So if you are working as an intern, I would highly recommend that you get a letter from your employer. Now that could be the supervising pharmacist or whoever is your direct supervisor when you're working. So you can also ask a mentor. If you've worked on research or other major projects with a mentor, like through the Scholars Program or the Clinical Research Program, you can ask for a letter from one of them as well. The others should probably be lower on your list. So try to avoid, if you can, letters from like the dean or Professor Feeblecorn or other administrators. The name is nice, you know, it's nice to have a dean or an associate dean of student affairs writing you a letter of recommendation, but how well do they really know you? Now, if one of them was your mentor or you worked together on a project closely, that's different. Okay, I'm talking about just generic, I'm gonna get a letter from my dean because it's gonna look good. That's not something you need to do. Then as a course coordinator who works with TAs, I've been asked to write letters of recommendation for my TAs before. That's all well and good if you were like a lead TA or you really stepped up and worked closely with me on a major project. But if you just showed up and did your job as a TA, that's not really a great choice. There's not a whole lot I can say past you showed up, you did your job. And that's not going to be a good use of a reference for you. And then you're going to avoid personal contacts. I think you all know this, but this is not like a reference to adopt a dog or rent an apartment. So we're not going to be asking family, friends who know you personally. This isn't a character reference, it's a professional reference. So some questions to consider when you're deciding who to ask for a reference. So how well do they know you? Hopefully they spent a good amount of time working with you, either clinically or in some other form. Can they provide a positive recommendation, and can they provide relevant examples? A good recommendation gives very specific examples. I'll show you in a minute what the form looks like. Do they have experience writing recommendations for residency? As I mentioned, it's great if you've got someone who works with residents or does this all the time, because they know what to write for a candidate that they really want to help out, to get have the best application packet. And lastly, and I feel bad even saying this, but will they meet the deadline? Unfortunately, there have been instances where some reference writers just are not good at meeting the deadline, and they've got students on the hook to the last minute. And it is extremely stressful for those students who are waiting when their application deadline is 11:59 tonight and they have not gotten their reference. So make sure that you, especially if you're not sure, you definitely ask them in the context of, do you feel that you can write me a positive recommendation, and is this deadline feasible for you to work with? And I say have a backup in the event of a no response. And that's not just because of the deadline, but I have said no to students before, either because I didn't feel like I knew them well enough, like the TA kind of situation before. I've said no because there's really not a whole lot that I can say. And then I actually had a student who I did not have a great experience with on rotation actually asked me for a letter of recommendation, which honestly surprised me because it was no surprise that they were struggling. So I did unfortunately have to say no in that situation as well. So have a backup if you can. When should you ask? This says by late November at the latest. I do appreciate that some rotations will go until mid-December, and that's the exception to the rule in terms of when you should ask. But if you know the rotation, so the next module starts November 2nd. If you get to Thanksgiving and you're really doing well on that rotation and you think that this is a preceptor I would like to get a letter from, it really can't hurt to ask them at that point. With a caveat, I realize the rotation still has 3 weeks to go, but assuming things can continue along this path, would you be willing to write me a letter, a positive recommendation for residency? And just keep in mind that these references are due, like I said, sometimes just a few days after Christmas. This is a busy time for a lot of people, so the more notice you can give, the better. I like to have them out well in advance of Christmas. That way they don't get lost in the holiday shuffle and getting ready for the new semester. And how do you ask? You can ask at the end of a rotation in person if you're there, over email or phone, but you want to not just say, can you write me a recommendation? You should definitely qualify that. Can you write me a positive recommendation? And like I said, are you able to, do you have time and can you meet these deadlines? And then usually once students ask me for a recommendation, I have them provide me a little grid or table that just tells me all the programs they're applying to, the deadlines, anything specific. Some programs will say, make sure that your recommenders say something about this, or make sure that they answer specifically this question. And then I try to get a summary of their career goals or their residency goals, just so I know what context to write my letter in. Okay, so how will the forecast process work for recommenders and you, of course, the candidate? So you're going to enter the writer's contact information into Forecast. So you're going to want to touch base with them first before you enter their information into Forecast, because as soon as you enter their email and hit OK, they're going to get an email right away. And that's not going to look good if you haven't asked them for that recommendation yet. So make sure they're aware and let them know they'll be getting an email with a link to Forecast. They will be asked to rank you on specific attributes. I will show you the form. You have to give actual textual comments on at least 3 of them. Okay, you should all be seeing the recommendation form now. If you're not, somebody shout out that you can't see it. But basically, we have to put in how long we've known the candidate and about how frequent our interactions were. And then this is the scale we use: exceeds, appropriate, fails to meet, or not applicable. I will tell you that I just read an article about references, and the overwhelming majority of candidates are ranked exceed expectation. That's, in my opinion, a little problematic in and of itself, because clearly not every candidate exceeds expectations. And for those reference writers who are honest and say appropriate for some things, you know, I feel like that can then potentially put candidates into a tough spot. So yeah, unfortunately, a lot are marked exceeds expectation. Again, that's why it's nice, if you can, to have somebody write a reference who's experienced with writing references, will know these things. These are the characteristics that get evaluated. And like I said, the writer has to write comments for at least 3 of these. But honestly, I try to write comments for most of them, especially things like oral communication skills, assertiveness is a big one, clinical problem solving skills. There's a lot of characteristics that we have to write about. And then we have to answer these narrative questions. So talk about the nature of your interaction with the candidate and under what type of workflow. So I'll talk about, you know, I had this student during their first APPE. This is the type of clinic I work in. This is the number of patients we usually touch per day. This is what we do in the course of the rotation. And for being on their very first rotation, this student performed in the top 10% of students that I've ever precepted. So I get very specific. That type of quantification, like in the top 10% or whatever, how the student performed, is something that a lot of program directors will, I guess, weight when they consider the recommendation. Then we're asked to provide 2 strengths and 2 areas of improvement, and feel free to address any other characteristics. Then we have to rate you as highly recommended, recommend with reservation, or do not recommend. And again, and I could have told you this anecdotally without reading the paper, but the paper stated that the majority are highly recommended. So quite honestly, if I see anything less than highly recommended, I'm a little bit skeptical that they're trying to throw up a red flag for me. And then when you are entering your references, you're going to have the opportunity to select whether you want Dr. Slazak to write a general reference that you can utilize for all of your programs, or a specific reference for each individual program. On behalf of all your recommenders, please, please choose general, unless there's a very, very good reason to choose specific, because I would much rather write you one general recommendation that addresses all of those attributes versus 12 specific recommendations for each of your programs. And this is, I believe, what most programs are looking for, is the general recommendation. Questions about recommendations before we go any further? Who to ask, how to ask them. I do have a question. Would it be a good idea to ask my supervisor, a community pharmacist, for a letter of recommendation? So this is a tricky situation because, as I mentioned, there will be programs out there who are stumped and concerned that you didn't ask your supervisor for a letter. So I would say yes, with this caveat. I would perhaps walk them through this if they've never written a letter of recommendation before, or never written a recommendation for a residency before. So maybe they have, and maybe that's how you start the conversation. But you can also share this with them and let them know that this is what the programs are going to be looking for. You have to rate me on all of these skills. You have to comment on at least 3 of them. You're going to have to be very descriptive. And you can even share with them some of the things that I mentioned, that they should really be commenting on your clinical skills, your critical thinking skills. Of course, if they're a supervisor, you probably want them commenting on the basics, like, are you a good employee? Are you responsible? Are you trustworthy? And you can always even show them this form. This form is on ASHP's website. It's definitely not a secret. Okay. Is it okay to ask a preceptor who is also the residency director of the program you're interested in? So that's a good question. This happens a lot. So just to clarify, because I kind of skimmed over the question, if you're applying to my residency program and you want to ask me for a letter of recommendation because I was your preceptor. So obviously I can't write a letter of recommendation for my residency program, but I can provide you a letter of recommendation for the 11 other programs you're applying to. I'm just using random numbers, don't pay any attention to that. So you may ask them, but you don't want to actually designate that letter to go to that residency program. Feel free to unmute yourself, the asker of that question, but does that make sense? Forecast lets you have, I believe, up to 5 references, but you don't have to send all of them to every program. So you can designate which 3 or 4, if the program asks for 4, go to each program. Okay. Any other questions on references? Does that apply to preceptors at that program too, not the RPD? I guess it depends on the program. I mean, if you had like a longitudinal rotation at Buffalo General, you probably came in contact with a lot of different clinical pharmacists. That doesn't mean that they're all going to be intimately involved in the residency. So I would say you could still ask the preceptor for a letter of recommendation. Now, if you have the opportunity to also ask a 4th person to provide a recommendation, and you can designate a non-program preceptor letter to go to that program, then you could do that as well. But I would say that the preceptor, you can do it. It's just the downside is they already know you if you had a rotation there. So now you're effectively only giving them 2 recommendations that give them anything new, because they already knew what they were going to write about you, right? So try to get additional letter if you can.
Do we get to see what our preceptors put in, or what our recommenders put in their forms before we send it?
Really good question. No, you do not. So you see right now what the form looks like. This is all you'll see. Once they enter the reference, all you'll see is that they did it. You can't view it. Unless they print it and send it to you, I will say it's possible, but I've never actually done it.
Thank you.
You're welcome. Any other questions? Oh, here's one thing. All right, let's move on then. Oh, one more question. Would it be appropriate to ask a current PGY2 to write a letter of recommendation? Good question. If you are working very closely with a PGY2 resident, you certainly can ask them. However, I will say a couple of pros and a couple of cons. Pros, they know what residency programs are looking for. So they're probably going to be able to speak to the appropriate characteristics. The con is that they've probably never written the recommendation before, so you don't necessarily know that it's going to be thorough. It should be. A PGY2 should know what a good recommendation entails. The other possible con is that it's a resident. If you worked with that residence preceptor, it would probably be a better idea to ask the preceptor and see if the resident can kind of provide input to the preceptor. I have had PGY2 residents write recommendations before, so it happens. And I'm not going to say it's a definite don't, but if you can ask the actual pharmacist preceptor, that's probably better. Is it appropriate to have multiple references that work at the same practice site if their work is not related? For example, AmCare at a medical center where you also did an internal med rotation. So 2 separate preceptors under the same institution. Absolutely. Especially if you did a longitudinal. I know there's students out there that have done 3 and 4 rotations at a single site. So obviously most of their recommendations are probably going to come from preceptors at that site, but you want it to be different learning experiences, different APPEs, or at least different practice areas. Good questions. All right. So, oh, one more question. All right. All right, doing your homework here, where to apply. You need to compile a list of programs that interest you. That can be a challenge. There's a lot of options. A couple ways to start. ASHP has an online residency directory, so let's look at that for a moment. I'm hoping you've all been here and are intimately familiar with this already. Excuse me. You can search by a specific program. You can look by geographic region. You can select, you can break it down like PGY1, PGY2, or combined. You can even select a subcategory. So if it's a PGY1, it's not going to let me do it because I didn't enter all the other criteria, but it will let you enter a subcategory like managed care, community. And then you can also do an advanced search. So you can filter by model types. So for example, if you're looking for a PGY1, but you're looking more outpatient based, you can search that way. A few years ago, this wasn't a possibility. They've really done a lot of work upgrading this search feature. On the flip side, a Google search will do well for you as well. So long as you can access like a list of residency programs that are available, you can Google search and go to their websites for information. I will say that this directory can be updated by program directors, but not everything can be updated by program directors. They lock certain fields that you have to go through ASHP to update. It's always been kind of a weird sticking point. So I'm always concerned from year to year that my program, like the nitty gritty, isn't always updated. So you're going to find a lot better information about my program by going to my program website. So I would say, even if you find it on the directory, take the time to go to their website and read as well. ACCP also puts together a residency and fellowship directory. This one you have to pay for. So not every program is going to be in here. ASHP, just as a whole, ASHP is going to be more comprehensive, but certainly you will be able to search this directory as well. And like I mentioned, an internet search is useful as well. you always want to go review the website. Don't rely on the directory entry. In terms of requesting additional information, I always get a question: can I email the program director? If you need to, if you've adequately vetted their website, you've read all about their program, you feel comfortable that you have covered everything that's on there, and you still need more information, then by all means, yes, you can email the program director. Just don't email them something that could very easily have been answered by going to their website, because that's not going to reflect well on you as a candidate. Also, we need to start compiling a list of questions for each program that you want to visit at ASHP, or in this case, virtually visit at ASHP. So what additional information do you want to know about each program? So well, actually, we'll come back to this in just a second. I have more details on how to whittle down your program list. But lastly, transcripts are the final piece of your application packet. So here's the catch-22. The program deadline for specific programs might come before fall grades are available on your transcript. So if this is the case, you're going to request that a transcript be sent without your fall grades, all right? And then, just to be extra careful, you're going to request it again to go to forecast again when the fall grades are available. So depending on when your program deadlines are, you might be requesting your transcript twice to go to forecast. And I believe forecast has a form that you fill out, or you can get the form from the UD office as well. And I'm going to be honest, when it comes to transcripts, I picked my resident's brain on this because I've never seen the student interface in forecast. So if you have questions on the whole transcript process, you know, you can ask me. I may not be able to answer them, but I would honestly check with a former student who went through the process. They're going to have the best perspective. So choosing potential programs and asking the right questions. This is what I was talking about. Which programs are right for you? So in the roadmap to postgraduate pharmacy training, there is a table, and this is one that I linked in the chat box as well. But this gives you a little self-evaluation. So what does an ideal residency candidate look like? And maybe where do you fall? You know, are you a superstar who checks every one of these boxes? If you do, that's fantastic. But if you don't, that's okay too. You want to make sure you cover some of the pieces in a lot of these boxes. And then if you're looking at this and you're saying, I'm missing this, I'm missing that, you know, maybe that gives you some additional idea as to what you write in your letter of intent. You know, how do you play up? How do you set yourself apart based on what you have done? Okay. So you don't want to focus on what you haven't done. You want to focus on marketing what you have done. And again, based on your self-assessment, choose the right variety of programs. If you are checking all of those boxes, maybe you can apply to highly competitive programs like you know, University of Michigan, University of Maryland, Johns Hopkins, UNC. Or are you somebody that's probably going to fare better in a moderately or less competitive program? I would honestly lump these two together. There's no real way to say these are less competitive, these are moderately competitive, but certainly you're going to have your highly competitive program. These are your big programs, usually linked with academic medical centers, like I mentioned, University of Maryland, Johns Hopkins, University of Michigan, Ohio State, and then your smaller community type hospitals will be considered the moderately competitive. Just want to make sure I'm not missing. I wrote myself notes, and of course I'm ignoring them. I want to make sure I'm giving you all the information I want to. Okay. So when you are whittling down that list of residency programs, This is where it's time. So I love a good Excel spreadsheet to keep organized, right? I'm a nerd. Many of you are too. So you're in good company. I'm in good company, I should say. But what you can do is really start to organize your thoughts, your preferences. So you want to decide what you want in a residency program and then start coming up with a grid so you can track what each program has and does it check all your boxes, so to speak. So this example form is also from Roadmap to Postgraduate Training. So these are just some example characteristics that you might want to include when you create your own grid, if you will. So is it a large hospital? Is it a small community hospital? Is it inpatient? Is it outpatient? Is it urban, rural, local? Do you want to be in a big city? Is the cost of living something you're thinking of? These are all things to be considering. What kind of services do they offer? What kind of rotations do they offer maybe? What's the staffing component look like? Is this something where you're going to be 12 days on, 2 days off? Or are you maybe staffing only once a month, for example? If you're interested in teaching opportunities, what kinds of opportunities do they offer? Is there a teaching certificate? Do you get to do didactic lectures? Do you get to precept students? What's offered in terms of research support, meeting attendance? Are they going to pay for you to go to Midyear, for example, to present your poster? Believe it or not, there are programs that do not pay for their residents to travel, to go to meetings. They tell you up front, and some of them will say, our salary is slightly higher because we can't pay for you to actually travel. But these are things that you're going to want to take into consideration. The training environment. Who is the RPD? How many co-residents would you have? Are the preceptors board certified? Are they, how long have they been preceptors? Are there any faculty that work at the site? So you can definitely take these or leave these, add your own. They may or may not, each of these be important to you, but find what's important to you and you can start to sift through some programs and decide where you're going to apply or at least who you want to talk to at Midyear. All right. So we talked again about doing the homework. The residency showcase at Midyear is really, or any residency showcase for that matter, is your time to ask for clarification or elaborations on the program. Again, this isn't where you say, tell me about your program, because nobody wants to tell you all about their program. They want to answer your questions based on your sincere interest. So in a typical residency year, ASHP would be the main residency showcase that you're attending. But this year, with the pandemic and everything going virtual, virtual showcases are popping up all over the place. So I'm not even talking just about our showcase that we're putting on the 10th of November, which most of you on this call, the P4s, are registered for. But I know that I've sent out a handful of invitations for other schools or other program showcases. So this advice really goes for any showcase that you're attending, any format that you're attending. Be prepared to ask several questions and don't make it a question that can be easily answered by reviewing the program materials. And again, can you contact the RPD later? Yes, if you need to, you absolutely can. Just to give you an idea of how I see our showcase working, I've attended a couple of other schools' showcases in the last couple of weeks, and I'm kind of learning what I like and what I don't like. What I will probably do, since we have 2 hours, is give, I'm thinking 15 to 20 minute group sessions, but I think I'm going to have you sign up. So I will probably ask you to sign up for like 5 programs that you want to meet with. We have probably around 15 to 20 programs, so we have a nice representation, but they're also very different. Like there's managed care, there's community, there's inpatient, there's programs from a lot of different places along the East Coast. There's local programs. So I will probably give you the opportunity to sign up for, if it's 20-minute sessions, probably 5. If I go with 15, it will probably be slightly more than that. And my rationale, before you get upset and say, oh, I don't want to have to sign up for programs. My rationale is to kind of force you to read about the programs in advance and then decide which ones you want to sign up to meet with. As well as, I don't want any of the breakout rooms with the program directors to be empty. I don't want anybody who's representing a program to feel like I'm wasting their time because students don't want to talk to them. So I figured by having signups based on how many students we have attending, everyone will get adequate traffic through their room. And, you know, if you don't necessarily want to go to 6 rooms, you don't have to, but you can also use it as a learning experience to prep for the mid-year showcase as well. So please be prepared to ask questions. If you and a program director and 3 other students are in a room, you don't want to be the only one who's not asking questions. All right. Moving on to registering for forecast and the match. So this is going to be open within the next couple of weeks. You can visit the forecast information page on the ASHP site. So it opens November 3rd. It's got a lot of great information here. So not only how to log in, but there's these webinars, these videos. You can even view the presentation slide. There's a YouTube video. I really would encourage you to watch all of these videos and get all the information, because you don't want to be clicking around there in forecasts and not feel certain what you're supposed to be doing to make sure that the programs get the right application packet. So take the time, watch the videos. It's got a lot of great information in them. The cost, I can't find this year's cost, so this was probably last year's cost. It was $110 to register and for the first 4 applications. Then $43 per program thereafter. So just doing the math here, if you are like many other students who on average apply to about 10 programs, that's a sizable amount of money. So you want to make sure that you're saving and prepared to spend the money on your application. The good news, I guess, is that you're not traveling to mid-year. You're not paying for a flight. You're not paying for a hotel room. You're probably not even going to be paying for registration if you're already a member. So that's the good news. And then you also have to register for the national match. So this is what the national match webpage looks like. You would go to, let's see, this is specifically for participants. If you go just to, let's see, you can choose pharmacy, and it will give you a list of dates. We'll go through these later. And then you can sign in, of course, as an applicant once you're registered. This is where you'll be entering your rank list. Last year, it was $160, and that's a flat rate. Doesn't matter how many programs you rank. All right, so a final preparation for mid-year. I crossed some things out. I don't know, I feel bad for you guys that you're not going to get to experience the craziness that is mid-year. And I'm sure some of you are a little bit upset that you're not going to be meeting a lot of programs in person. But I would suggest that you do your best at planning on making yourself the best candidate on paper, on your CV, on your letter of intent, and then really starting to get comfortable with virtual interviewing, because I'm getting a sense that most interviews will probably be remote as well this year, unless you happen to be local. But even then, a lot of places are going to have limits on people from the outside not coming into their facility. So I think a lot of this is going to be online this year. So preparing for midyear, you want to plan your schedule. Let's see, what do I have here? This is the midyear website. There's a lot of student programming information. Let's see. Oh, this is information for prospective residents about the showcase, but they also do have student programming, which we'll come back to in just a minute, because they do have a lot of good student programming. There are all kinds of social media accounts that go along with ASHP, and they usually have an app each year that has the full schedule that can link right into your, your device's calendar. So I would assume they will still have that this year as well, even though it's not a live meeting. I know AACP was virtual and they still had it. So I would think ASHP will as well. That usually comes out mid-November. The residency showcase is also virtual. What I've been able to garner from reading the materials that are out there is that it will not be a face-to-face like we are right now. It looks more like the live portion during these times will probably be in a chat format. I don't know if there's going to be video or not. The times are also slightly different than they used to be to adjust for time zone differences. So instead of 8 a.m. to 11 a.m., they've shifted it back to 10 a.m. to 1 p.m. And the afternoon sessions, instead of 1 to 4, are 3 to 6. You will be able to view showcase listings in advance. They actually had a link to it posted already, but it did not work for me. So I think it's probably coming within the next few days. We just found out yesterday that we're in the Monday showcase, so it's probably going to take them a few days to get the list up. So this is final preparation in terms of like packing. I don't know why I left this slide in here because really you don't have to do this. But what you really want to still have, I guess, is focus down here, a list of prepared questions for each program that you want to visit. You do want to plan too. So remember that every program is going to be represented during one of these showcases. So these 3 showcases are all unique and they have completely different programs. So you are going to want to plan to go to all of them, assuming that there's at least 1 or 2 programs in each that you're going to want to talk to. But you want to plot out what programs you want to talk to during the showcase. You don't want to just be mulling around the day of because you won't be prepared, you don't know what questions to ask, etc. You still should have something to write down notes, questions, and to organize the information that you get. We usually talk about, whether or not to bring your CV, business card. That really won't be an issue this year. So dressing for success, again, it doesn't appear that there's going to be a video component to the residency showcase, but still for your interview, you're still going to need to dress professionally. I fully appreciate that it might just be that it's from the waist up that you're seeing, but this is still a time to put on a suit. Everybody, males, females, a suit is appropriate. Ladies, it shows a skirt here, but pants are completely appropriate as well. Gentlemen, I know this isn't the first time you've seen professional dress, so I'm not going to belabor the point here. All right, so let's just get to the meat of the residency showcase. What is the purpose of it? It's really not so much for the program directors to interview you. It's really your opportunity to learn more about the programs you are interested in. Speak with or communicate in some way with the program directors, preceptors, and current residents. The current residents I have in bold because it's really important. Nobody else is probably going to give you the most honest appraisal of a program than a current resident, so long as their program director isn't standing right next to them, I'm sure. So you want to have compiled a short list of specific questions that you want to ask each program. So some of them may be general, some of them may be specific to each program based on what you've read about them. But things like how many residents, again, that may even be on their website. So you might just make sure that you're not asking anything that you could easily find yourself. What are the requirements of the residents? What is their accreditation status? You could ask more about the types of activities that are done on rotations, because most websites are going to list what types of rotations are actually required. This is where you want to use that grid that we talked about with all of the characteristics that you rate on each program, and start to ask some more specific questions. So you may be asked, why are you interested in our program? Strengths, weaknesses, why are you a good fit? Why residency? I will be honest in that this is probably going to be less likely in an electronic format unless you're face-to-face. And even at the showcase, I don't tend to interview my people who show interest in my program, but it is a possibility. So definitely think of these. These are questions you're probably going to be asked on interviews anyway, so it can't hurt to start formulating your go-to answer. All right. Be respectful. There's a lot of people that probably want to talk to that program. If you're not a P4, be careful of taking up too much time. As much as it's nice that you're interested in the program director is probably going to want to spend less of their energy talking to you because you're not immediately applying to their program. You know, not to be rude, and they probably won't be rude either, but just be careful of monopolizing their time. The ASHP usually in their guidelines recommend that you only attend the second half of each showcase. I'm not sure if that's going to be an expectation for this year with the digital format. And professionalism does matter. Again, even if it's not video, if you're just in a chat room, you still want to be professional. They will remember names. Probably they'll remember names for bad reasons more frequently than they'll remember names for good reasons. I hate to say that, but I have sat at showcases before, and basically after I talk to people, we have everybody sign in at our showcase when it's in person, and there will probably be some form of that digitally as well, just so we can keep track of who's interested. But if I talk to somebody and if, you know, I get weird questions or you could tell they're not interested. I had one student who, trying to remember the exact context, but they basically were like saying that they feel that residents get worked too hard just because they're residents. What is amount of work do you feel is adequate for a resident? It was just a very strange question, and it came across like he didn't want to be asked to work hard. So I very discreetly put a little check mark next to his name. And when the time came later to look at applications, I knew that he probably wasn't going to be a great fit for the program. So while the programs aren't interviewing you, you still have plenty of opportunity to make a good or not so good impression at a showcase. All right, let's talk for just a minute about PPS. So this is separate from the showcase. The interesting thing is that it's free, again, to ASHP student members this year and resident members. So I don't usually recommend that students seeking PGY1 residencies sign up for PPS. Not all PGY1 interviews interview at PPS. In fact, most don't. It's more for PGY2s, really heavy on the fellowships, and job opportunities would be at PPS predominantly. But at this point, since it's free, it probably can't hurt to sign up and search the listings and see if there's PGY1s in there. What PPS is, unlike the showcase, PPS is one-on-one interview. So you would either video or whatever other format they're using this year, you would actually go into the system and schedule a one-on-one interview with a specific program. It runs Sunday through Thursday, and they're usually, I want to say, 30-minute interviews. So what would you do at ASHP? So unfortunately, we really aren't going to have the opportunities for networking, receptions. I don't have to give you the whole spiel on professionalism and not getting into trouble while you're at midyear, because you'll all be probably sitting at your homes attending midyear. But there is still a great opportunity to take advantage of the programming. So before we even get to the student programming, I don't know if anybody's taken a look at the keynote speakers, but Tom Hanks is the keynote, and Dr. Fauci is actually speaking on Wednesday morning, I think. So that's interesting. They're really timely, relevant speakers. You can, in addition to student programming, look at the resident poster sessions. The poster sessions, I don't yet know the format, but you probably will still get the opportunity to communicate with the poster presenter in some way. And it can be a good opportunity to speak to current residents about their research and learn about different types of residency projects. You can absolutely attend the clinical sessions that aren't student programming as well. It's all available to you. But student programming alone, these are all of the sessions. There's some really good ones in here. So talking about forecasts, interview skills, networking tips, how to work through the match, strategies for success, you know, getting ready for applying and interviews. Am I competitive? How to get ready for the process. Like this would be great for P3s. There's a lot of these that would actually be great for P3s. How to look for postgraduate opportunities. This may be another good one that talks about, let's see, does it tell me what? Yeah, if you're considering postgraduate training but not sure where to begin. So again, this looks like it's going to be more geared towards P3s, where P4s have things like the match and interview skills and preparing for residency applications and interviews. Financial wellness, personal branding, which is something that's new and upcoming. You know, what is your personal brand? And again, you can certainly attend any of the clinical sessions that are available as well. All right, any questions about midyear? I'm as curious as you are to see what the format is. So after midyear, this is your chance to organize all of the information that you've gleaned from talking to all of the different programs. So which programs are going to make the cut? Who are you actually going to apply to? When are the application deadlines? And that's when you want to put together a plan of attack. You know, get those letters of intent polished. Make sure your reference writers are updated in terms of what programs you're going to be applying to. And get everything organized and finalized in forecasts. The big question, how many applications are appropriate? So this has been the ratio for a long time, probably the last 10 years, about 3 candidates for every 2 positions. So the national match rate is typically somewhere around 65%. So items to consider, you are paying for applications, and the bad news is that if you have to go into phase 2, you'll be paying for those applications too, which in my opinion is not fair, but it is what it is at this point. Interviews cost time and money too. Again, you probably won't be flying out and staying at hotels anywhere this year, or very minimally, but it is a time cost for sure, especially if you're on rotation, for example. So You know, if you're a top tier candidate, you do your self-assessment, you're really looking strong on that self-assessment tool, you know, what we talked about before. Maybe you don't want to apply to 15 programs, because what happens if you get interviews at most of them? Can you actually make that happen with your schedule? And again, this goes back to what types of programs are you applying to. If you're applying to all top tier programs, then maybe you do need some more. So consider those highly versus moderately competitive programs. The average is about 10 applications per candidate, but that ranges from 1 application all the way up to like 20. I definitely wouldn't recommend the 20 end, but most students I see fall somewhere usually between 8 and I would say 13 or 14. So what might an interview look like? This is prior to the current state of affairs, but usually it's a half a day to a full day. There's tours, there's interviews. Usually it's a round robin where you interview with several different groups or individuals. There might be a presentation or clinical assessment of some sort. I know of programs who have you take quizzes, programs that give you cases and have you work them up, programs that have you come in and deliver a presentation that you've already put together. There's usually ample time for Q&A. And also many programs traditionally will interview more than 1 candidate per session. So it's not unreasonable for some programs to bring in 3 to 6 candidates. Depends on how big the program is, you know. For example, I usually bring in 2 candidates per day. I'm honestly not sure yet how we're going to work that, doing it all virtual. I know that a lot of programs are filming things, tours of their institutions, videos that describe their program, and then I imagine a lot of interviews will take place in a similar setting to where we are now, in Zoom, utilizing breakout rooms perhaps, you know, while one candidate is interviewing with this person in one breakout room, the other candidate is interviewing in this breakout room with another preceptor. This is just an example of what a schedule might look like for one candidate. Notice there's a tour. Usually there's lunch if you're there at lunchtime. It's unfortunate that we're going to miss that this year because you get to have that small talk over lunch. It's just not the same over a virtual format, but you know, we'll make do. This is what an example might look like of some place that has 3 candidates interviewing at once. So notice how they're kind of rotating through a bunch of different experiences. And I do something similar to this at my site. While one person is doing an interview with the preceptors, another person is working up the case, and a third person is interviewing with my So preparing for your interviews, I know there's sites out there that pharmacy school applicants can go to get possible questions for interviews. I'm certain that there's information out there on what types of questions are asked during residency interviews. So you want to prepare answers to some questions. I mean, there's even, if you Google search it, you'll find this. Start to think of your answers for some of those more common questions, like, you know, things like strengths and weaknesses, sure, but you're probably going to get asked a lot of situational questions too, like, tell me about a time, tell me about your best patient encounter, tell me about your worst patient encounter, tell me about a time when you provided a recommendation to a physician and they declined it. How did you handle that? What did you do and what was the outcome? Tell me about a time when you didn't see eye to eye with a colleague on something. So there's going to be a lot of questions that require you to draw on your personal experiences as a pharmacy student. So even while you're on rotation, and it's okay if you haven't done this yet, but maybe start to do it now, jot down some patient care experiences that are notable for one reason or another that you can draw on during an interview. Maybe it's something that really, you know, because of the way this patient responded to me, I now do something differently. Or I really made it, I caught this issue and wound up, you know, saving the patient from a hospitalization. You know, those are the types of things that you want to, good and bad, make note of because you could possibly use them during interviews. Prepare a few questions of your own. Never ever go into an interview without at least a couple of questions to ask because you will most definitely 99% of the time get asked, what questions do you have for us? And it makes you look disengaged and disinterested if you don't have at least a couple of questions to ask. So again, you don't want it to be something that's obvious, but at the same time, it doesn't necessarily have to be something that's overwhelmingly of interest to you, but just have some questions that you can ask and engage in conversation. Again, you'll probably not be on site, but if you are, it's advisable to bring a laptop or tablet as well in case you do need to work up a case or something. So Dr. Chilbert, I'm sorry, is holding an interview skills workshop Tuesday, January 5th via Zoom. What her plans are, I think, are to go through some interview questions and pair you up with another student who's attending and have you do some mock interviewing together. She was considering possibly having you create a question to bring with you. So I'm sure she'll be sending out more information on that as well. This is really important, and I want you to make note of this. We have, through UB Career Services, access to Big Interview. So what this is I should have thought, I honestly, oh, I saved my password, excellent. I was gonna say, I don't know my password. So this is a simulated interview platform where you can interview with an avatar on your screen and record your interviews. So you can do these practice interviews. I actually have, let's see, it's a custom set, yeah. So I have 3 custom interview sets in here for pharmacy residency. So you could take any or all of these interviews. So you can, oh, I started to take the interview apparently. But basically you can, these are the questions, but there will be an avatar who asks you the question and you actually have to verbalize your answers. It records you. You can, I just want to make sure I don't do anything. You can record your interview and you can actually forward the link to an advisor, a mentor, a preceptor who can give you feedback on your interview, which is excellent. The other nice thing about this program is not only can you practice, but you can learn. It gives you a ton, if you start to like search through here, of different videos to watch to prepare for your interview. So like this fast track is 16 lessons, but everything from types of interviews and practicing to what to wear to nonverbal communication, analyzing job descriptions, that may not be necessarily super relevant for you, but a lot of these videos can be really useful in just preparing for your interview. So I highly recommend that you seek that out as a resource. All right, before we move on to the match, are there any questions? We're almost at the end here. All right. We're going to watch an example of a match. Just do me a favor, and if you can't hear it, somebody just speak up, but I did enable my computer sound, so we should be in good shape.
Let's run a match to see how our matching algorithm places applicants into positions. For this match, there are 3 programs with their rank order lists shown above and 3 applicants with their rank order lists shown below. The algorithm starts with Abel and tries to place him into his first choice, program B. Since program B has ranked Abel and has a position available, Abel is tentatively matched to program B. Next, the algorithm tries to place Baker into his first choice, program A. Since program A has ranked Baker and has a position available, Baker is tentatively matched to program A. We say that the matches are tentative because an applicant who is matched to a program at one point in the process may later be removed from the program to make room for a different applicant that is more preferred. Let's see how that works. The algorithm tries to place Charles into his first choice, program B. Program B only has one position and it is currently filled by Abel. However, the algorithm sees that program B prefers Charles over Abel. So the algorithm removes Abel from the position and Charles is tentatively matched into program B. Since Abel has just been removed from a tentative match, the algorithm tries to rematch Abel. Abel's first choice is program B, but that position is filled by Charles, who is more preferred than Abel, so Abel will not match to program B. Next, the algorithm tries to match Abel into his second choice, program A. Since program A has ranked Abel and has a position available, Abel is tentatively matched to program A. The matching algorithm is now complete, as each applicant's list has been processed and each applicant is tentatively matched to the most preferred choice possible. Tentative matches now become final. Program C has no matches and is left with one unfilled position. You should note that with the matching algorithm, no applicant or program can be forced into a final match until all applicant rank order lists have been considered for the best possible tentative matches. Just remember, you will be matched to the most preferred program on your rank order list that ranks you and does not fill all its available positions with applicants it prefers.
Okay. Find my way back to my slides here. So that's important to note that it favors the applicant preference. Like it said, you will be matched with your preferred program that has a spot for you that's not already filled by applicants that they prefer over you. So you hear a lot about students attempting strategies of some kind. That is never a good idea because it's usually just to use your true preference is going to be the best approach. You know, you'll hear some people trying to strategize like, oh, I really like this program better, but I really feel like the program director over here maybe clicked with me better. So maybe I better rank that one higher. You got to go with your true preference. I don't have a lot of experience with the couples match. I can tell you that it exists and that I generally wouldn't recommend it. It's probably easier and safer for you to, if there's 2 of you trying to go to the same location together, or at least the same city, to do your own rank lists that, you know, geographically are close. Because the couples match basically goes, they need to match both of them in that case. So sometimes that takes opportunities away from one in order to find a program that will fit the other, so to speak. All right, so I don't really have any updates for phase 1, phase 2, or the post-match scramble, but we do have some important dates. These came right from the NMS website that you started to see. Basically, the dates that you need to know, you've got to register. That real deadline for registration is it says applicants should register by December 31st, but you can really register right up to the beginning of March, just before your ranks are due. March 4th is your deadline to certify your rank order list. So when the rank order list opens on February 15th, you can start to go in and rank your programs. You don't have to finalize it, you don't certify it. That means you can go back in and you can switch it if you're, if you're on the fence between certain programs. But March 4th is the date it has to be final. or excuse me, March 5th is the date that it has to be final. And then March 19th is when the match results are available for phase 1. If you don't match in phase 1, you can enter into phase 2. So by by noon on March 19th, Forecasts or National Match puts out a list of unmatched positions. And by March 23rd, you can start submitting applications for phase 2. The final date to submit a rank order list for phase 2 is April 7th, and then April 14th is the phase 2 match results. And then if any programs are available still after phase 2, that would be the post-match scramble. And April 15th, you can start to apply to those. Typically, there's very, very few left at that point, though. Don't match during phase 1. So my best advice would be move forward with your whole process with a contingency plan for not matching in phase 1. Don't let phase 2 be a surprise for you. So put your rank order list in for phase 1, forget about it in the meantime, and start to prepare for phase 2. So reflect and regroup. So what might you change about your application package or process? Why do you think you didn't match? This is a good time to reach out to faculty, to an advisor or mentor or preceptors, and really reevaluate your whole application process and reapply. I can't underscore enough to have a faculty member or preceptor or someone working with you through the whole process in phase 1. I've worked with candidates in phase 2, students who are applying in phase 2, and sometimes the letters of intent and the CVs I see are just, without being rude, they're absolutely terrible. And you feel bad, but at the same time, you're like, well, of course they didn't match during phase 1, because look at the CV doesn't even have like rotation preceptors' names on them or dates of rotations. And their letter of intent is not what a letter of intent is supposed to be. So by taking all of the things we're talking about during your prep for phase 1, reviewing with an advisor or mentor, that can really help you hopefully not have to go to phase 2. But if you do, there is a document that ASHP has on their website. This is also something that I linked in the chat box earlier, a preparation guide for phase 2. And it basically talks about things I just talked about, reflections of phase 1, what worked and what didn't, reevaluate your goals, utilize your mentor. Networking can be very, very important during phase 2, because if your mentor or you know people who have unmatched positions and they feel comfortable with your abilities, this is a time when we will go out of our way to reach out to that program director and say, hey, I am a student here who didn't match. I'm not sure what went wrong, but I can attest I've had them on rotation. I've worked with them. They're a really strong candidate. So this is where you want to reach out to your network for sure. Rethinking your references isn't a bad idea, especially, you might have had a couple of really good rotations in January, February, March that you could get a new reference that's better than the one that you had before. I'm not going to go through all of this, but something you should have, and honestly, as much as it sucks to think about, you should read it and be prepared for it, and hope that you don't need it. But you want to be prepared more than anything. All right. That is all that I have. I do see, I'm not sure why it wasn't showing up when I was checking, but I do see that I have some more questions here. So let me stop my screen share and go to the questions here. So the first one, is there a way or website to see if a program is in danger of losing their accreditation when you apply? Unfortunately, there is not. So unlike ACPE, which accredits pharmacy schools, they are very transparent and they post, like if a school is on probation or has lost their accreditation. I am not aware of a place that is publicly available for residency programs. This would be something that you can talk to the program about. I don't think it's taboo to be able to ask them, you know, oh, I see you're accredited. When was your last site visit? Or are you anticipating a site visit anytime soon? I can tell you that the old accreditation cycle, so to speak, was a maximum of a 6-year accreditation, or a 3-year accreditation, or a 1-year. If you really didn't do so well, you might get a 1-year. Now they've expanded the full cycle to 8 years. So if you have a program telling you that they're accredited for 6 or 8 years, that's about the best it can be. The other thing I want to address with regard to accreditation is students do ask too, is it a terrible thing to apply to a program that's not accredited? And the answer is not necessarily. Just because a program is not accredited does not mean it's bad, but it does mean basically buyer beware. You don't have that set of standards that ASHP puts forward, so you don't have that requirement of that framework. Now that may be okay to you. You may really like a program and not mind that they're not giving you exactly what ASHP says they should be giving you. But just beware, or be aware that if you go to apply to a PGY2 that's accredited, an accredited PGY1 is a requirement. So if you go to an unaccredited PGY1, you may disqualify yourself from a lot of PGY2s. That would be my only, I hate to say warning, because there are plenty good programs out there that aren't accredited, but that would be my concern. All right, next question. What kind of questions do you recommend we ask to our program directors to help us stand out? So that's honestly anything you want to know about the program that still remains professional. You know, you might ask some really thoughtful questions that I've been asked in the past. What do I think is the best asset of our program, or the best strength of our program? If I could change something about the program, what would it be? Those are really, I think, very thought-provoking questions, because program directors are always going to have things they like about their program and don't like about the program. A lot of times they'll ask about what a typical day looks like for a resident or for a preceptor, or maybe something about expectations. But really anything goes. You want to just have a couple standard ones that you are, have ready to ask when it's time. If you don't have any other ones, you can at least then jump to one of your pre-recorded questions. Next question. Do you have any comments on those on-site interviews? Oh, PPS. I don't know if this question was asked before or after I talked about PPS, but PPS, they are one-on-one interviews. As I mentioned before, traditionally, there's not a lot of PGY1 programs that recruit at PPS. It's usually more for PGY2s. Fellowships, if you're looking for a fellowship, PPS is a must. That's where they do all of their interviewing, and they actually do their early rounds of interviewing at PPS. You'll usually know by the end of PPS if you're getting invited for an on-site interview for a fellowship. And that's about my limitation on my knowledge of how the fellowship process works. But you can register for PPS and peruse the listings and see if there's any PGY1 programs that are there that are interviewing, and you can take advantage of it. I mean, it's free, so you might as well check it out. And if you register and don't wind up doing any interviews, then you haven't really lost anything. Next question, when you're working up a patient case, will they let you access resources such as Lexicon? That is a very program-dependent question. I personally let my residents use whatever resources they want to. If they have their own, so I'm a PGY2 program. Whatever access they have to electronic resources through their PGY1, I let them use. And if they don't, I give them access to what's on PubNet at UV. That said, we were actually just talking about possibly taking resources away from them to gauge a little bit more of their baseline knowledge. So it really depends on the program. Next question. Do you have any recommendations on how to handle attending midyear while on rotations? Should we request the full time off as we would if it was in person? So that is a really good question, and I am not even 100% sure how to advise you on that one. I would say most definitely you will probably want Monday and Tuesday. I'm going to say Monday, you'll probably want the full day off because there's 2 showcases that day, right? There's a showcase from 10 to 1 and 3 to 6. So you're probably going to have programs at every showcase. So I would definitely ask off Monday. Tuesday, the showcase is only 3 to 6. So you could feasibly work most of the day and ask to get out early. I would, however, as soon as they release the exact schedule, scope out the programming. And if there's other programs you want to attend Tuesday morning, you can certainly ask for the day off. Also, I'm not 100% sure when student posters are going to be. Usually those aren't lengthy sessions, but again, if there's other things you want to attend, you're going to need to kind of customize your request. I know some residency programs are still giving the whole week off. I personally am not for my residents. And I wasn't planning on it with my students. We're going to have to be flexible because I want them to be able to attend what they want to attend, but I also don't think it's probably going to be necessary to ask for the whole week off. But I'm thinking Monday, possibly Tuesday, you will want to ask off. Okay, that is all. Does anybody have any more questions? All right, I don't see any more questions. You can always email me if something comes up. I can also stick around for a few minutes if you would rather put your camera on and talk face to face. I'd be happy to. Thank you everybody for coming. It was great to, I didn't really get to see you, but it was great to theoretically see you. I miss seeing everybody in person. So take care, everybody. Have a great night.
Thank you.